I really wanted to show you guys the crocuses in bloom and just the really cool colors that they get. Geez, if I can get my shadow out of it. I don't know how well you're getting to see the white centers and just the mass of them. But they do open up during the day, and then as soon as the sun's not actively on them, they close into a little pod, basically, purple pod. There's some yellow ones right there. They're starting to fade a bit. Purple seems to be the wild type because 12 years ago I had a completely evenly balanced yellow, purple, white combination, and I planted them all over the place. And I have 4 non-purple clusters left. Now, after I planted them, I did see quite a few chipmunks carrying off crocuses. They seem to be a bit of a delicacy for the cute little fuzzy diggy creatures. And I don't know if it's because these ones divide so much more aggressively, because I have definitely redistributed. Hey guys, there's Purple Herp right there, and that's Splotch. I've definitely divided the purples out of their clusters. This is a newly transplanted one right here. Well, actually the shade seems to be letting the colors pick up on camera better. And here's an example. I just transplanted a huge cluster. The cluster was probably about 8 to 10 inches across. And when I was young, can you see them? They're all like there, in case you weren't looking in the right spot. And then I skipped this, and then they continue there. So that'll be a big blanket of purple. I do transplant while things are growing. A lot of the times you have to transplant them as if they're live plants and assume you're going to lose the blooms, but then at least I know where they are, you know. There's a really big cluster. Something I assumed about bulbs when I was young is that they would divide kind of like two-dimensionally and go across. But something I've noticed having so many bulbs now and repeatedly digging them up is that indeed they form a sphere. And that's largely why they don't bloom as well when they're overcrowded. As you can see, 1 in maybe 40 actually bloomed out of this cluster this year, and that's how I knew I needed to divide it. The ones that bloom are on top typically, and the ones below are sending greenery through a cluster of really densely packed bulbs. That's usually about like this. If it's really, really wide up top, like this, plus from here to the other side of the screen from my thumb, then you're going to have at least this much of a cluster, because they grow out, they grow around the sides, they go up. But because the ones on top that are blooming get less and less nutrients because their roots are just rooting into more bulbs below them, and because the ones at the bottom are usually smaller and have to put up so much greenery that the bloom never reaches the surface, what you're left with then is very sparse blooms for an overcrowded bundle of bulb flowers. But then there's so many more bulbs than you expect when you dig them up. It's like, you might think this cluster probably has like 15. I'm here to tell you there's probably 50 there. And this probably has, well, that one almost definitely has around 200. It feels like to me that's highly likely. So, and then see how this one's got ones coming out the side, and there will be ones popping through the brick openings. Yeah, that's what we look at typically when we dig up bulbs. So you can only imagine how many snowdrops I have. Good Lord. I go ahead and let them bloom sparsely because I have too many. They divide so aggressively. This right here is where I took them from. I left one little cluster that didn't want to come up and was farther away from the road. Because if I could get this sidewalk to go to here, I'll be happy. I think I had this pretty narrow, and the tires weren't there originally. So all of these bulbs here are just cramping my style. Coming up in the walkway, making it hard to walk through here. That's what they're doing. Let's go up at the front and just look at some daffodils in the sunlight. And then look at all the mess that the raccoons made over the winter. It's been a really warm spring. This was a couple clusters that I interspersed. You can see the purple popping through here and all through here. Those will get more and more dense as time goes by. There's a few popping right there. And this also shows you that once they're out of the sun, they start to close. They end up closing much tighter than this by night. But that's what they do once the sun isn't actively shining on them, is they start to pull their petals closed compared to the ones back there. I also planted some giant crocus at one point, and there's really only 2 of those left, maybe 3 clusters of those left. This one's not open yet, but the ones over here getting a little more sun. So that's a giant crocus, as is this. They come in multiple colors, but again, the purple is the closest to the wild type and seems best adapted to creature pressures such as eating the bulbs and the flowers, as well as best adapted to increasing their numbers much more rapidly. Now the giants, they bloom later in the year, and if I dig them up, they'll be at risk again. So basically, once a crocus starts to take hold, I try not to move them unless they're getting overcrowded like those ones, and I'm going to have to water those ones in the back in repeatedly over the next couple weeks. Even though it's kind of a chilly time, if the dirt's soggy and the weather's cold, the critters dig less because they don't want to get their little tootsies wet in the cold weather. So that's basically what I'm doing to protect them back there. You can also heavily mulch, but expect with the bulbs that are treated a bit more like delicacies. Look at all that mess the raccoons made. Goodness. Expect that they'll get a lot more attention and that you have to protect them. But yeah, that's just a quick look at bulbs at midday. Taking a break from being busy. I hope you're having a good one. Thanks so much for visiting the cliffside. And this has been permaculture. Take care. Bye.